religion is the greatest thing that ever happened to white supremacy because it convinces black people that the very people trying to destroy them are their greatest allies. That you can change the way people think just by sharing your religious beliefs with them. And because of that, the white power structure has weaponized Islam and Christianity against black people. If you're too dumb to recognize that the religions are not your friend, then stay in them.
Now, do you think that if tomorrow they said, you know what, we give up, black folks,
white folks,
the supremacists,
and they leave us,
and they say
they abandon Newark and leave it to the blacks,
and they leave it to the blacks,
guess what blacks would do?
Tell me.
They would go find wherever the white people go to, we would get them and bring them back and put them back in charge.
and
black people do not want to see Newark without white folks.
How does Dr.
Okay, let's go back to where this began. So first of all, April 4th, 1968, they assassinate Dr. King. December of 69, they take out Fred Hampton. August 21st, 1971, they execute George Jackson. Black Liberation Army is pretty much neutralized by the mid-80s. Okay. Now, after they killed Dr. King, they said, we will never let black America rise again against the government. Never. You got to remember, the 1960s exhausted America's resources. Do you realize that in the 1950s and 60s, we almost brought this government to its knees? It had to worry about Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, SNCC, CORE, the Freedom Riders, SCLC, Garvey Movement, Nation of Islam, Deacons for Defense, Black Panthers, Black Liberation Army. They couldn't take it. Every time they looked, there was a new, sincere black organization popping up that was trying to do some fighting, right? So they said, what are we going to do about this? First thing they're going to say is we're going to economically bankrupt the black community by taking all the industrial building trade programs out of their neighborhood. So in the 1970s, they went into the inner city high schools, Newark, Baltimore, Philly, Detroit, Chicago, wherever you want to go. And they took the programs out that taught us how to be plumbers, electricians, roofers, welders, auto mechanics. Why did they do this? To make sure the black man could no longer earn for his family. At that time, America was largely an industrial society. So they stripped the schools so you would not have the skills to pay your bills. The biggest reason why black men are in jail to this very day is because the high schools no longer teach them the skills that pay the bills. And they fed us a diet of go to college, go to college. Forget about trade school, go to college. So now what do you have in America? 2 million American Africans with master's and doctorate degrees who cannot find a job. So number one was the economic devastation. That was the 70s. Then in the 1980s, they hit us with a double weapon of mass destruction. One was chemical warfare, one was biological warfare. The chemical warfare was the crack cocaine epidemic, and the biological warfare was the HIV/AIDS. They hit you both. And guess what? 95% of the problems that we're dealing with now are a direct outgrowth of the 1980s. You see that? The crack, the AIDS, and the joblessness gave birth to almost everything we're dealing with now. The mental health issues, the homelessness, the fatherlessness, the mass incarceration, everything was born then. But they didn't stop. In the 1980s, they hit you with the Bill Clinton crime bill. So for the first time in American history, you can go to jail for the rest of your life if you never put a hand on a soul. They still didn't stop. In the year 2000, George W. Bush comes to power, and he creates a program called the Faith-Based Initiative, FBI, where he found a loophole in federal law that allows the government to give churches money. And ever since the U.S. government been funding black churches, you ain't seen a black church participate in any relevant struggle for black people since. If we look around Newark, New Jersey right now, show me a church fighting against miseducation. Show me a church fighting against mass incarceration. Show me a church fighting against gentrification, police genocide, or economic apartheid. You can't find them. They've been effectively neutralized. The point that I'm making is we are at war. And part of the reason why we can't win is black people think they're part of America as opposed to understanding they are at war with America. You got to have the appropriate warrior mindset in order to engage this society so we can fight and thrive within it. As long as you got people who should be building for themselves, trying to include and integrate into the enemy's army, that's a recipe for disaster. And unfortunately, we raise our children with the I am proud to be an American mentality as opposed to I am proud to be an African mentality, and you need to do something for your community. We're the only people who believe in integration. We're the only people who believe in color blindedness. We're the only people who believe in multiculturalism. across Newark, you don't see Asians pushing colorblindness. You don't see Asians pushing multiculturalism. You don't see Asians pushing this is a melting pot. You don't see Mexicans doing that, Arabs. The only people who do that are black people. And what's ironic about that is what? We're the worst victims of racism. How can the worst victims of racism be the most clueless about it? A lot of it has to do with our religious indoctrination. Religions have convinced black people that the best way to live your life is to act as if color don't matter. And until the greatest victims of racism recognize that color does matter, we will never be free. The purpose of religion in a black community is to deify destruction. The purpose of religion in a black community is to make people who have nothing think they have everything because they belong to a particular religion. Religion is the greatest thing that ever happened to white supremacy because it convinces black people that the very people trying to destroy them are their greatest allies. That you can change the way people think just by sharing your religious beliefs with them. And because of that, the white power structure has weaponized Islam and Christianity against black people. If you're too dumb to recognize that the religions are not your friend, then stay in them.
Now, I agree with that. I've always believed that, and I agree with that 1,000,000%. But,
and I will say this. The struggle has to be a balanced one. It can't be spirituality over politics, and it can't be politics over spirituality. If you look at our past, a lot of our organizations have leaned to one side or the other. You have some organizations, they were purely political. I don't want to talk about God at all, right? You got other organizations that are so religious, they don't deal with any political economic struggle. It got to be both. If you look at any great religious teacher, I don't care if it's Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Buddha, if you are that profoundly spiritual, there's no way you do not impact the society in which you live. Because Jesus, whether he existed or not, is irrelevant. I'm dealing with the Jesus as we know him to be. Because Jesus was so profoundly spiritual, he automatically became a threat to white supremacy in the time that he lived. Because Muhammad ibn Abdullah was so politically spiritual, he automatically became a political economic force where he lived. The contradiction of the black church is you people claim to be holier than thou, and neither you nor your church matters to a single black person.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree about that. I believe that's one of the biggest chains. The religion is a big chain.
Because spirituality never needed to be organized.
It does not need to be organized.
The great conspiracy of religion, spirituality never needed to be organized. So why did they organize spirituality? What was wrong with it being decentralized? Nothing. That's why they organized it. In order to turn spirituality into a weapon of the state, it had to be organized. And one thing black people need to understand, any institution that does not believe in intellectual freedom doesn't believe in political and economic freedom either. They go hand in hand. Religions do not believe in intellectual freedom. You're taught what to believe, and you better never deviate. There's no such thing as, I just want to see what other people say about Jesus who don't believe in Christianity. That's a no-no. I just want to see what other people say about Muhammad ibn Abdullah who don't believe in Islam. That's a no-no. Religions do not value intellectual development, intellectual ability, intellectual analysis. Why? Because religions don't have all the answers. And all of them have a history that would make people question as to whether or not these things really come from God in the first place. Because more people have died in the name of Islam and Christianity than any other purpose in human history. Which is to say that religion is an institution of mind control. Nobody has ever started a religion to free anybody. Study every religion, black nationalist religion, white religion, mainstream religion. Anytime religion was organized, it was for the purpose of a handful of people who wanted to exploit the rest. Religion is mind control. It has nothing to do with spiritual liberation.
I think so many of us, our people, are puppets in the music industry. Why do you think they push?
Because black America's God is money. And we need to be honest. And not to pick on religion too much, because I speak in churches a lot. I'm a descendant of Christian pastors. But black America's God is money. And when your God is money, when you grow up in a community that values how you look, what you drive, what you wear, more than anything else, like 50 Cent said, you're going to get rich or die trying. And so the reason that our musicians are not accountable is no different than the reason nobody else is accountable. No sector of Black America is accountable to the community. Not the musicians, not the doctors, not the therapists, not the business owners, not the politicians. No one is accountable to the Black community because the Black community doesn't want to be accountable to itself. Most of us are willing to give the last breath to being accepted by white people, which makes us revolutionarily unique in history because we're the only people whose solution to oppression is inclusion with the oppressor. No other group facing oppression in human history put forth a solution that says the way we end our oppression is to imitate, okay, and to force ourselves into the enemy's society. And that's exactly what Black people are trying to do. Remember, we're the only oppressed group in modern history to never go to war with the oppressor. We never went to war with our oppressor. We went to war with our oppressor. We fought with Abraham Lincoln to save his country. You see that. The Civil War wasn't fought over slavery. It was fought to defeat the power that the South had, the unfair advantage. It had nothing to do with freeing Black folks. That was just a consequence of the war, not the cause of it. So getting back to your question, the problem that American Africans have is we want to be white. And if he is the standard that I am pursuing, why in the hell would I think about destroying the system he has created? Do you realize most Black people actually think the way the world runs is the way the world should run? That the problem is not white supremacy, power, and domination, but the fact that Black people haven't yet recognized that we should be imitating them?
I have a question. So I grew up to know without law, there's no order. I'm a business owner, so I have employees, I have staff. So you have to have law, you have to have rules.
You do.
Do you think...
But if there's no justice, the laws will not be followed.
Do you think that if tomorrow they said, you know what, we give up, Black folks,
white folks,
the supremacists,
and they leave us.
And they say...
They abandon Newark and leave it to the Blacks.
And they leave it to the Blacks.
Guess what Blacks would do?
Tell me.
They would go find wherever the white people go to, we would get them and bring them back and put them back in charge.
and
Black people do not want to see Newark without white folks.
How does Dr. Umar and Shino, what can we do? You said we're born here at this time to do this.
Yes, to overcome this.
They will tell me, this I know. I get fired up when I hear you talk like that because this I know. I know we're all soulmates and I know we came here. This is the best time to be alive ever. You know,
because if you win against global white supremacy, if you win against the American, British, French Empire, you will go down in history as the greatest revolutionaries who have ever lived because this is the greatest empire.
Okay. So
not greater than Africa, but in terms of demonic, evil, destructive, unfair, unjust, this is the greatest one to ever come.
So when you say that they'll turn around, and I meant this on a global, I meant this in like the country. Let's just say Joe Biden, everybody, there was no more presidency, no more nothing, and we were just able to go in.
We would go get white folks. You know what we would do? We would find out where they moved to, and we would move into their neighborhoods. Black people love white people, and I don't think we really understand the extent to which many of our own are psychologically dependent on pale people for self-validation. It was trained, indoctrinated, and conditioned in slavery. 20 generations later, we are still psychologically dependent on white folks.
So there's no hope?
No, there is hope with the children. Now, going back to the scripture.
Because if they left us and we have next to step up into power and we have children, but you said we'll go back and get them.
We'll go back and get them. Unless you train the children different. The problem is what is put in the mind can never be removed. Most of us have been tainted by white supremacy. You, just like a computer that has a virus, you can take your laptop to the computer specialist and he's going to bring it back and he's going to tell you what, I think I got rid of the virus. I'm not sure. And you work on that computer for a couple years and then all of a sudden one day, guess what? That virus popped back out. Why? Because you can never completely rid a computer from a virus. You see that? The same thing is with the human mind. So if we want to make sure we have a revolutionary generation of African people, we got to raise a whole generation of black children who never saw white Jesus, who never saw their mother with blonde hair, who never saw their father date a snow bunny. You got to raise a generation of black children where inferiority, white worship, and self-hate is so foreign from their mind that they wouldn't recognize it if they saw it.
How long do you think it'll take?
20 years, one generation.
So
if we started now in 20 years, we free.
So are we just starting now, or have we?
We ain't started. We're going to start with Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey, but remember what I said earlier. There's very little attention being put on the institutionalization of education for black children. Who's talking about it? Al Sharpton ain't talking about no independent schools. He getting money. Ben Crump ain't talking about no independent schools. He getting money. Jesse Jackson ain't talking about no independent schools. When he was still active, he was getting money. Who is really focused on building independent infrastructure in the black community? You go on YouTube, the fake woke community, you got all these economic experts. I want to know why they ain't got no bank, they ain't got no credit union, they ain't got no investment firm. You are a money master, but you have no vehicles for the community. That means you're a hustler and opportunist. Now,
the reason the prisons are swelling up is we took all the building trades out, the skills that pay the bills. We sent everybody to college, and college is not guaranteed to provide you with a livable wage. We have 2 million African Americans right now with master's and doctorate degrees who are unemployed.